$42 billion. Just hearing that number can be overwhelming. Coca-Cola, a giant and icon of America, is facing a crucial turning point. Rumors about the company leaving its homeland have sparked waves of speculation in the business world. Coca-Cola has no intention of abandoning the U.S. Recently, they announced a $330 million investment to build a new headquarters in Birmingham, Alabama. This project is expected to create 50 new jobs and maintain over 750 existing positions. Just this alone shows the company's strong commitment to the American market. If you thought Coca-Cola was leaving, this should make you rethink. A company of this scale and experience does not walk away from the second-largest economy in the world. Their ongoing investment is the clearest proof of their confidence in the U.S. economy. It also sends a positive signal to thousands of workers in their supply chain. This shows that despite external pressures, Coca-Cola chooses to stay and grow in the U.S., a decision that's not easy but responsible. Tariffs on aluminum, a key raw material for producing cans, have pushed costs higher. But this is not a disaster. CEO James Quincy called tariffs a manageable issue, thanks to flexible measures like increasing plastic bottle use and adjusting supply chains. Coca-Cola is leveraging its ability to diversify materials and change strategies to minimize tariff impacts. This is a perfect example of a large company's resilience. Business is rarely smooth. It's how a company reacts to challenges that determine success or failure, and Coca-Cola is clearly showing adaptability. Importantly, they are not fleeing the market but persistently adapting, ensuring steady supply and stable prices for consumers. This is a bright spot in today's complex economic picture. When you hear $42 billion, many assume it's the loss caused by tariffs, but the facts tell a different story. In 2024, Coca-Cola's revenue reached nearly $47 billion. Its current market capitalization is about $309 billion. No official report confirms a $42 billion loss linked to tariffs. This leads us to question where this number came from. Is it an exaggeration to catch attention or just a misunderstanding? Therefore, when facing huge numbers that sound impressive, we must stay cautious and verify carefully before fully trusting them. In today's information age, cross-checking multiple sources is key to avoid getting lost in a sea of data. Tariffs definitely put pressure on companies and labor markets, but in Coca-Cola's case, it's not all gloomy. New investments in the U.S. help maintain and create hundreds of jobs, supporting many families and stabilizing local communities. Their supply chain and retail networks remain strong, contributing positively to the economy. Despite certain difficulties, Coca-Cola shows persistence and responsibility towards the communities they operate in. This reflects the necessary balance between tariff policies and business strategies to both protect national interests and maintain global competitiveness. Coca-Cola's story is a profound lesson on how global businesses operate amid changing policies. They still commit to investing in the U.S. despite tariffs and rising costs. This proves the market's potential and attractiveness remain strong. At the same time, it reminds policymakers about the importance of creating a transparent, stable, and flexible business environment. Otherwise, excessive protectionism can backfire, pushing large corporations to seek more appealing markets elsewhere. As consumers and citizens, we can learn from this story the importance of flexibility and transparent information in today's economy. In a world of constant change, businesses and governments alike must embrace adaptability to thrive. Only by working together can we build a resilient economy that benefits everyone. And perhaps most importantly, long-term trust can only be built through consistency, not chaos. Coca-Cola didn't choose America just for profit. They stayed for its potential to evolve, even under pressure.
I will not speak to the president's relationships with Jeff Bezos, but I will tell you that this is certainly a hostile and political action by Amazon.
In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them.
A new report from Punchbowl News says that Amazon is looking to avoid the blame for raising prices as a result of President Trump's new tariff.
But I imagine you do when it comes to tariffs.
We look at all the things that could impact consumers and customers.
$13 billion. Yes, you heard that right. Amazon had to restructure contracts worth $13 billion in just 60 days. Sounds crazy, right? But it's only the tip of the iceberg in this crushing tariff crisis. So, have you ever wondered why Amazon is slowly pulling out of the US market? And more importantly, how does this impact you, the everyday consumer? At the start of this year, tariffs on Chinese imports reached an astounding 145%. That's like America saying, if you want to sell here, you're going to pay through the nose. Because of this, Amazon had to restructure $13 billion worth of contracts in just 2 months. But then, in mid-May 2025, a surprising twist. The US and China agreed to cut tariffs down to 30%. From 145% to 30%. Quite a relief, right? But hold on, it's not that simple. The de minimis exemption, which allowed shipments under $800 to enter tariff-free, was removed. That means 85% of low-cost packages from China now face tariffs. The good news? The new tariffs on these small shipments were adjusted to a friendlier 54% or a flat $100 per package. So, some pressure eased, but small sellers and consumers still have to navigate these tricky waters. Imagine being a worker in Michigan or Ohio, states known for their industrial backbone, only to see your factory move to Vietnam, Malaysia, or Mexico. Why? Because it's cheaper there. In 2024, over 60% of new projects in electronics and consumer goods were launched in Southeast Asia. Meanwhile, US manufacturing jobs dropped about 3%. Big companies like UPS cut tens of thousands of positions. This is no rumor. The global supply chain is shifting dramatically, and American workers face serious challenges ahead. We all love a good deal, but have you noticed that the price of children's car seats jumped by $100? Electronics, clothes, and shoes from overseas are up by about 15% on average. Feeling the pinch yet? Yale Budget Labs says the average American is losing roughly $2,800 in purchasing power this year thanks to tariffs and inflation. The recent tariff cut to 30% might ease things. But is it enough? If shoppers start buying pricier American-made products instead, are we entering a whole new ballgame? Have you noticed that Chinese goods aren't coming directly into the US anymore? Instead, they're rerouted through ports in Mexico, Vietnam, or Malaysia. Shipments through Mexican ports have doubled. Meanwhile, major US ports like Los Angeles and Long Beach are jammed up, with container backlogs up 25%, a total logistics nightmare. With tariffs down to 30%, will this trend ease? Will Chinese goods flood back? That's a big question on everyone's mind. But the fallout is bigger than prices and jobs. The entire logistics system is strained. Over 10,000 US port workers have been laid off in just 6 months. Consumers face higher prices and fewer choices. Small businesses are scrambling to survive as costs soar and customers tighten their belts. This crisis is far from over. The ripple effects will impact the economy, jobs, and your everyday shopping for months, maybe even years to come. Did you know that in just a few weeks, nearly $1.4 trillion have disappeared from the global financial markets? The US dollar, often called the king of currencies, is facing unprecedented changes. Is this the sign of an imminent decline, or just a mild flu for the greenback? There's a story that China's central bank, the People's Bank of China, sent an email to over 400 major export companies, telling them to stop using the US dollar in new contracts and switch to the renminbi or other currencies. Sounds like a historic turn, right? But wait, reliable sources like Reuters and Bloomberg have not confirmed this clearly. In reality, the PBOC only advised state banks to reduce USD purchases and foreign exchange reserves, a strategic but cautious step. If a sudden ban had actually happened, do you think global financial markets could stay calm? Absolutely not. So maybe this is just an exaggeration or a misunderstanding. This shows us that in the international currency world, every decision is weighed carefully because the consequences are massive. The 10-year U.S. Treasury yield is around 4.54%. That sounds high, but it is not the highest in over 20 years. In 2001, yields were even higher, regarding the $25.7 billion that left global bond funds in 1 week. Yes, this number is real, but that is a global figure, not just the US. Outflows from US funds are much smaller. So what really causes these volatilities? The Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes, inflation fears, trade tensions, and global political uncertainty. we should not just blame China. Financial markets are a complex web of multiple factors. In China, the renminbi is now the most used currency in cross-border domestic transactions, nearly 50%. That sounds impressive, right? But on a global scale, the renminbi only accounts for about 3.5% of total international payments, modest compared to the US dollar and euro dominance. What about the Bridge project? Blockchain technology enabling fast payments without the USD or the outdated SWIFT system sounds exciting. However, Bridge is still in testing and operates on a limited scale. In other words, the renminbi is rising, but it is not an immediate replacement. This race is just beginning, with a long road ahead. Did you know that China surpassed the US in total merchandise trade value back in 2013? And exports jumped 8.1% in April 2025? Clearly, this giant remains strong, but the claim that 70% of the global economy trades more with China than the US? That is not proven and might be an overstatement. The export surge mainly reflects businesses rushing before US tariffs were applied. International trade is far more complex than simple numbers, many interconnected forces at play. So always keep a healthy skepticism when hearing big numbers like these. Despite challenges, the US holds key tools sustaining its economic dominance. Flexible monetary policy lets the Fed react quickly to changes, balancing inflation and growth. Strong trade negotiation power helps keep the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency. The US is also developing a national digital currency to modernize finance and maintain leadership. While slow adaptation may raise borrowing costs and test confidence, the dollar's roots go far deeper. The US financial system is one of the most liquid and connected worldwide, encouraging global use of the greenback. Geopolitical influence and institutions like the IMF further support the dollar's stability and global acceptance. In short, the US dollar is not stepping down soon. It remains the king of global finance with powerful cards in hand.
You don't hear of things like Walmart closing. Walmart.
A shocker tonight for suburban shoppers. Walmart announcing it's closing 3 stores.
We have new information about Walmart's plan to close 2 of its San Diego stores.
At the beginning of 2025, Walmart, the retail giant with over 3,600 stores, shocked everyone by announcing the closure of many locations. A brand famous for low prices like Walmart is now forced to downsize right at home. So, what is the real reason behind this? Causes of import tariffs and their impact on prices. Did you know that import tariffs on Chinese goods once peaked at 145%, then dropped to about 30%, but still enough to cause prices to soar? This isn't just a number on paper. It's a real cost businesses must pay when importing goods. Take a clear example. Barbie dolls, which used to cost $10.49, have jumped to $14.99 in just 1 week. Child car seats also rose from $350 to over $450. These aren't luxury items, but everyday essentials for many American families. Can you imagine how much pressure this puts on consumers' budgets? And that's not even counting other products, from food to household goods, which are also facing similar price hikes. There's no denying that high import tariffs have deeply changed the price structure, raising consumer costs and making life much harder for many Americans, especially while the economy remains unstable. Walmart's strategy and government, expert reactions. Faced with this situation, Walmart couldn't stay idle. They quickly shifted sourcing to countries like Vietnam, India, and Mexico, where costs are lower and tariffs aren't as high as on Chinese goods. As you can see, this is a practical move to reduce costs and keep prices competitive. Moreover, Walmart has accelerated automation, using robots and AI in warehouses and stores to cut labor costs and maintain profits. However, the U.S. government demands that Walmart absorb the tariffs and not pass the costs on to consumers by raising prices. But economic experts say otherwise. Import tariffs are real, unavoidable costs. No matter how hard Walmart tries, these costs will eventually affect the business or the consumer. Simply put, absorbing tariffs without raising prices is almost impossible in business. Do you agree with this? Economic, social, and financial consequences for Walmart. The trade war not only raised prices but also heavily impacted jobs in local economies, especially in rural America. Millions of workers lost jobs or faced reduced hours as Walmart closed warehouses and scaled back operations. Domestic suppliers lost contracts as Walmart shifted to foreign imports, severely affecting related industries like transportation and services. Small communities suffered major losses, from rising housing costs and tight school budgets to strained healthcare services. Although Walmart's Q1 2025 revenue reached $65.61 billion, profits declined due to rising costs, including import tariffs and inventory expenses to avoid tariffs. This signals a warning that the trade war is weakening large companies' financial health and causing long-term negative effects on the U.S. economy. The original goal of the trade war was to protect domestic industry, but in reality, many companies like Walmart have moved operations abroad to avoid tariffs, pushing costs onto consumers and reducing domestic jobs. What do you think? Does this policy truly protect U.S. industry or only harm workers in local communities? Walmart is adapting to survive in a tough environment, but the price U.S. workers, especially in rural areas, pay is job losses, lower incomes, and economic instability. Will this situation continue without causing even more serious consequences for America's economy and society?
Did you know BYD sold over 4.27 million vehicles in 2024 alone? That's a global phenomenon, reshaping the automotive landscape worldwide. Meanwhile, in Canada, more than 125,000 auto workers are waiting for a miracle as major U.S. automakers begin to pull back from the region. In January 2025, the United States officially imposed a 25% tariff on all imported vehicles. For Canada, the rate is only 12.5%, but this comes with strict and complex conditions. Vehicles must have a high percentage of North American-made components to qualify. This is easier said than done, especially for highly integrated global supply chains. Immediately, automotive giants like GM, Ford, and Stellantis began scaling back production activities in Ontario. While not a full withdrawal, this resulted in fewer shifts, reduced output, and temporary layoffs that have placed workers in a difficult situation. Imagine Ontario, Canada's auto heartland, now struggling to keep pace due to policy changes just across the border. This has created a ripple effect through the local economy, impacting not only workers, but also small businesses and supply chain partners dependent on a vibrant auto sector. In light of these challenges, Canada has started to look beyond traditional partnerships. Enter BYD, China's electric vehicle giant. BYD is actively negotiating plans to open a manufacturing plant in Ontario. Other Chinese automakers like NIO and Geely have also been mentioned as pursuing R&D operations in Quebec. Imagine a Chinese EV factory emerging right in the heart of Canada's automotive territory. But there's more to this story. China needs critical minerals such as lithium and cobalt, plus access to clean energy resources, many of which are abundant in Canada. Canada, in turn, needs job creation, foreign investment, and a new industrial strategy after facing setbacks from U.S. companies' retreat. This appears to be a mutually beneficial exchange on the surface. Yet the situation is more complex and fraught with challenges than it might seem at first glance. For instance, integrating Chinese technology and capital into Canadian industries raises questions about long-term control and influence. Predictably, the reaction from Washington has been sharp and unmistakable. White House advisors have raised concerns that allowing Chinese firms to deepen their roots in North America's EV sector would effectively mean handing over crucial technology to a strategic rival. Electric vehicles today represent more than just transportation. They symbolize control over energy, dominance of supply chains, and broader geopolitical power. If Canada proceeds down this path, it risks becoming a key hub for Beijing's strategic expansion into the Western Hemisphere. The growing presence of Chinese corporations in such a critical sector fuels American concerns about potential technology leaks and loss of control over essential manufacturing processes. These issues extend well beyond economic competition. They touch on national security risks that policymakers cannot ignore. The U.S. government is closely monitoring developments, warning Canada of the strategic implications and urging caution in this evolving partnership. If the deal comes to fruition, a BYD manufacturing plant in Ontario could create between 2,000 and 5,000 direct jobs. Additionally, suppliers of batteries, semiconductors, and other high-tech equipment could experience significant growth opportunities along the expanded supply chain. Ontario could be transformed into the new Detroit for electric vehicles, this time powered by clean energy rather than fossil fuels. However, these bright prospects come with risks that cannot be overlooked. Canadian businesses may face the loss of decision-making power as they become intertwined with larger Eastern production networks. Smaller domestic companies could struggle to compete against heavily backed Chinese conglomerates with strong government support. Striking a balance between economic benefits and strategic autonomy is the biggest challenge Canada faces in this rapidly evolving landscape. With China's influence expanding and the U.S. government pushing back firmly, Canada must carefully weigh the costs and benefits of this pivotal move. The stakes have never been higher for the Canadian automotive sector, and the decisions made today will shape the industry's trajectory for decades.
The international credit agency Moodys downgraded the U.S.'s credit rating from its highest AAA rating to AA1. Rick, there are so many things that are swirling around this. We know about the Moodys downgrade. We know that that raises some concerns about
budget. I would hope that the Moodys message and some of the agita that the media expressed when it occurred.
Did you know? The U.S. government's annual interest expenses have soared to a staggering $870 billion. And Moody's just downgraded America's sovereign credit rating from AA to AA1, the last step before losing top-tier status altogether. What do you think this signals for the world's largest economy? U.S. credit downgrade and debt inflation strategy. In May 2025, Moody's downgraded the U.S. credit rating. Why? Because interest costs are soaring, expected to consume nearly 30% of the federal budget by 2035, triple today's share. Imagine how much is left for education, healthcare, and development with such huge interest payments. The Treasury Secretary announced no spending cuts but plans to let inflation erode the debt. Sounds clever, but risky. Real GDP growth is only 1.1%, while inflation hits 4.2%. This means bondholders get paid, but the real value of the dollar is shrinking. Confidence in U.S. bonds may waver, pushing yields up and making borrowing ever more expensive. This could be the vicious cycle America is facing. Rising bond yields, USD decline, and China's retreat. Long-term bond yields have surged past 5%, folks. This shows growing investor anxiety. They demand higher returns to protect their money from losing value. Did you know? In just 1 month, the US dollar has lost nearly 4% of its value. A shocking figure. This not only spikes import costs, but also pushes domestic inflation higher, putting huge pressure on consumers and the overall US economy. Even more surprising, China, the US's largest creditor for 20 years, is quietly pulling back. They've slashed their U.S. bond holdings to $765 billion and shifted to short-term investments to avoid long-term risks amid global turmoil. What if other investors follow suit? The U.S. bond market would face massive pressure, yields would skyrocket, and borrowing costs for the U.S. government would spiral out of control. This could force budget cuts on vital programs or tax hikes, directly hitting economic growth. But it doesn't stop there. This mass retreat could trigger a domino effect, shaking the entire global financial system. Not just the US, but the whole world would feel the impact. Do you think the US can escape this dangerous spiral? Or is this the warning sign of a new global financial crisis? Gold prices surge, allies reject trade demands, and Fed may need to intervene. Gold prices have soared past $3,200 per ounce, with experts forecasting a rise to $4,000 by 2026. This clearly signals investors seeking safe havens away from U.S. dollar risks. As for trade allies, they're no longer accepting tough demands as before. These shifts erode trust and create turmoil in international markets. So, the big question: who will buy new U.S. debt if this continues? If countries stop buying, the Fed will have to step in, buying government bonds to stabilize the market. But you know what that means. More money supply, heavier inflation pressure, further dollar devaluation, and a threat to America's global economic standing. Do you think the U.S. can escape this predicament? The AB9 credit rating, the symbol of financial safety, is now gone. Bond yields are rising sharply, inflation outpaces real growth, and major investors like China are steadily retreating from the U.S. debt market.
Ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? And the answer is fundamentally it's based on two principles: incurring a huge amount of debt to buy things that other countries make for us. And to make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. That is not a recipe for economic prosperity. It's not a recipe for low prices, and it's not a recipe for good jobs in the United States of America.
In just 24 hours, China slapped a 125% tariff on American goods, canceled a $400 million Boeing contract, and caused the U.S. luxury market to lose billions in value. What happens when a politician slips with words, and the global economy pays the price? Is this the perfect example of the phrase, open mouth, insert foot, that Americans often joke about? Recently, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance referred to Chinese workers as peasants. Though perhaps meant as a colloquial phrase, Beijing took this as a direct insult to their labor force, a group China holds as a pillar of its national growth. But the response was not just words or media statements. It came in the form of hard policy. China imposed a 125% tariff on U.S. goods, with no prior warning. They canceled Boeing orders worth $400 million, a heavy blow to America's aviation industry. And they halted all mail and cargo shipments from Hong Kong to the U.S., causing supply chain blockages. China's swift, decisive, and uncompromising moves show they are not just defending pride, but using the incident to reassert their position in the simmering trade war. Right after China's tariff retaliation, Chinese consumers responded with their wallets. This battleground wasn't in agriculture or technology, but in luxury goods. Gucci saw a 30% drop in market value in the first quarter alone. LVMH lost over 2% in market cap overnight as sales stalled in Asia. High-end stores in Shanghai and Beijing, once bustling with thousands daily, are now unusually empty. On Chinese social media, Western brands are labeled betrayal brands. Shopping stopped being personal. It became a collective statement. Rather than taxing individual products, China succeeded in weaponizing consumer emotion, a soft but extremely powerful tool. While policymakers debate tariffs' pros and cons, Americans see the impact firsthand. Food, household goods, and electronics prices have risen significantly in recent quarters. Walmart warned it can't hold prices forever amid rising import costs. Some imported medicines, like ibuprofen, are becoming scarce due to supply disruptions from China. A survey by Allianz found nearly 60% of Americans believe the trade war is harming more than helping. The impact isn't limited to domestic markets. The U.S. faces subtle shifts from international partners. India remains cautious, refraining from openly supporting either side, instead focusing on strengthening bilateral relations with both. The European Union threatens retaliatory tariffs worth €95 billion if the U.S. escalates tariffs unilaterally. Canada quietly raised tariffs by 25% on American cars and is pushing trade talks with the EU. Meanwhile, China pursues a different path, restructuring supply chains, focusing on domestic market growth, encouraging citizens to buy local instead of foreign brands. And most importantly, China doesn't just talk policy, it shapes global policy through consumer behavior. After intense pressure from businesses, markets, and public opinion, both sides agreed to cool down. The U.S. cut tariffs from 145% to 30%. China lowered its tariffs from 125% to 10%. The bigger questions remain. Supply chains are broken. Who will rebuild them? Trade trust is damaged. Who will restore it? Tariffs can change, but markets have adapted, consumers have shifted, and partners are charting their own courses. Reducing tariffs is necessary, but restoring trust requires more than a decree. It demands a long-term strategy.